reviewed and calibrated to still deliver ROIs and targets. But with the coronavirus or COVID-19 being declared a pandemic, with most of the world on a lockdown in order to flatten the curve and slow the virus from spreading, how can brands and companies shift gears to stay afloat? What marketing strategies must be implemented by large corporations and most especially the small and medium-sized enterprises in the time of COVID-19? Dr. Donald Lim is the Chief Operating Officer of Dito CME and the Chief Innovation Officer of the Udenna Corporation. He will be joining me on the set. Open for Business will return. Keep tuned in.
We are living during the most extraordinary time in human history.
All transport will go fully electric.
Es wird eine völlig neue Mobilität geben, meine Damen und Herren.
Rev, the new auto show on DW. Getting you into gear on cutting-edge developments.
Wasserstofferzeugung braucht Energie.
We focus on green technology.
Das Auto ist im Betrieb absolut emissionsfrei.
And also feature head-to-heads. And the latest launches.
Das Fahrgefühl war gut, er lässt sich sehr gut fahren, er liegt sehr gut auf der Straße.
And mobility stories from around the world.
Mercedes depuis 2005.
COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by a new coronavirus introduced to humans for the first time. It is spread from person to person, mainly through the droplets produced when an infected person speaks, coughs, or sneezes. These droplets can land in the mouths or noses of people who are nearby. These droplets are too heavy to travel far in the air. They only travel approximately 1 meter and quickly settle on surfaces. This is the reason person-to-person spread is happening mainly between close contacts. The exact time that the virus can survive on surfaces is not yet known. So it is wise to clean surfaces regularly, particularly in the vicinity of people infected with COVID-19. Hands touch many surfaces, which can be contaminated with the virus. You should therefore avoid touching your eyes, nose, or mouth, since contaminated hands can transfer the virus from the surface to yourself. When coughing or sneezing, cover your mouth and nose with the bend of your elbow or use a disposable tissue. If a tissue is used, discard it immediately into a closed bin. The most effective way to prevent the spread of the new coronavirus is to clean your hands frequently with an alcohol-based hand rub or soap and water. This will eliminate the virus if it is on your hands. Stay healthy and prevent the spread of COVID-19.
for Business is back, and with me on the set is Donald Lim, the Chief Operating Officer of Dito CME and the Chief Innovation Officer of the Udenna Corporation. Thank you for coming here, Donald. We're at least 1 meter,
1 meter
away.
Let's make sure.
We're practicing social distancing here at the studio. And as mentioned, the greatest challenge now in marketing is, the lockdowns. What's happening now? What's going to happen? We know that Open for Business has a lot of viewers also coming from the small and medium enterprises, and what we've noticed while monitoring is that everybody is in the social media now, and everybody are glued into their TV sets, radio sets, and in their mobile phones. But I'm sure a lot of marketers are worrying what to do next, especially if they have not integrated their digital marketing into the overall marketing strategy. So what's going to happen in the time of
I think if I wear the hat of a business owner, especially if you are a small business owner, you have to first accept the fact that today we are in a age of crisis, right? So this is a period of crisis where for the next 30 days, 60 days, everything is a bit uncertain. So what they taught you in school or what you have been doing for the past 10 years, you basically throw that out of the window because it will not apply here in this time. Yes. So you will see also, for example, there are certain industries that will have certain advantages, and what we call the winning industries, those who are selling alcohols and medical kits and anything that has to do with health. You will see that they would be doing quite well. In fact, even on my way here, retail should pick up, especially those that has to do with groceries, anything that has to do with food supply. So you will see a lot of that picking up. But then on the other side, you will see those who will really be affected, hotels, restaurants. So anything that has to do with entertainment, people getting together, events, those will literally get into almost zero in terms of revenue. Right? So in when you talk about in business, as when you have a period of crisis, you have to implement things very differently. So depending on what category and what business you are in. And especially right now, for example, myself personally, I'm part owner of some restaurants. We actually have to just close down and just tell them, okay, for the next 2 weeks, let's wait and see. But we don't operate first because even if you do, we were thinking, actually, let's do a cloud kitchen. Let's do and try to get orders. But then you have to get people to come in. They would have to operate. You have to think about their transport. So it's actually very hard for everyone. So we realize, well, since this is a time where the rule book, there's no rules on marketing during a crisis, right? So any businessman should just have to really apply a common business sense. And we realize for that, for example, we would just bleed ourselves out. We would rather than risk our workers, why don't we just advance their 13-month, advance whatever, be very flexible with them. But if you operate that business and you open the lights and electricity and everything else, you actually end up losing more.
I have a follow-up question on that, Donald. But going back to what you mentioned earlier, businesses should recognize that we are in a crisis.
Yeah.
Now, to address that major problem, some organizations, small or large, create this crisis management teams. Yeah. If that is the case, although you said that there's no specific rules, but will some specific best practices apply where, like say, companies, large or small, can come up with a crisis management team? And what is the process in identifying or addressing this crisis to ensure that somehow there's some sense of business continuity in it?
Actually, if you talk about the big and the larger companies and the SMEs, they operate differently. For larger companies, like for example with Udenna, who I represent, with you as a media network, when we have a declaration by our president, automatically we can actually shift our hats and say, okay, let's go to crisis mode, let's go to quarantine, let's operate work from home. And actually, To tell you honestly, work from home, itong 1 week of working from home is actually more, we're more busy actually, you know.
And we're more
busier.
productive, no?
We're productive, but we're very busy because everyone was like messaging, so left and right, and things have to keep on moving. So because under the Udenna group, we still have our we still have our transport group. We have our Contis, we have Wendy's. I mean, we operate a lot of companies. So some are operating, some are not. And I mean, when you look at it from that perspective, so on more like multinationals and large companies like us, we have we somewhat do risk management. So in a way, for example, most companies would have a risk management manual. So for certain crises, you open that book, like what you say. So what should you do when you look at your people, your employees, what you should do with customers. You also look at the financials, among many other things. So it's kind of a plug and play. Although you know it's one of those. I remember when you're a pilot and when the airplane is going down, then you check the manual, right? What should you do if this happens? Because it rarely happens. Actually, it's not even rare. It's like happen once out of 100 or 1,000 times, right?
So with the large corporations, malinaw yun. Kasi may mga manual sila. What about the small and medium enterprises? Because we know that they're, as you mentioned, they operate differently. You know, I think the smaller ones are more flexible.
Yeah. For SMEs, I would suggest always go back to your roots, how you set up your business. I've been talking to a lot of entrepreneur friends, and they would come to me and say, problemado. Paano na? What should we do? And I would always say, number one, if you look at how you started your business, you actually bootstrapped. You didn't give yourself salaries. You started very, very small, but you were very creative. You were very innovative, and then you grew from there. So there's nothing wrong. In fact, you should also have an advantage because sometimes you forget where you came from. When you have 5 stores already, 10 stores already, no. And I've seen already some also who are. I just saw on my Facebook feed a lot of my friends. I own a gym. I own a restaurant. 2 stores, 3 stores. What do we do now that we're closed, right? And I said this is the most opportune time for you. Number one, if you look at it for the SMEs. Number one, of course, from the business side, I always say take stock of your cash flow because that's the most important. You should know where you are.
Cash is king.
No, of course, cash is always king in business. Right? In business, cash is always king. So take stock of where you are, how much you have, and at the same time, because you have to, once you go to crisis, it's going to be how long can you sustain yourself and your employees because that's the first part. And again, you've seen some larger companies, not only here, even around the world, where they laid off already because they know actually first set if they do the crisis management financial when they pencil push, okay, we cannot sustain. They know already. That's why they had to lay off certain people. I think that's also something like if you're a small business and if you can support 10 people, why not? Even at the very basic. Later na tayo magkwentahan. Like what is like okay sa'yo na yan or what is okay bayaran mo or utang yan. Right? But I think cash is the most important. You have to take stock of how much cash you really have for the business. But there was a forum where people asked me, what should I do? Okay, so fine. May pera, walang pera, tapos na. I always tell them when I go to so many entrepreneur forum, they would say, sobrang busy. The market is so competitive right now. And the last thing you do, there's a luxury, it's a luxury when you have time for planning, to check and look at your business model, redo or take a fresh look at your vision, mission, among other things. And that's why I tell them, now, the world is telling you stop. And it's equal, all of you will stop. Yes. So everyone would start to have what we call a reset button. And you have to relook at your business. And it's what we call world mandated. Every small business will now have to take take into account na okay, the business has been running some 1 year, some can be 5 years. But right now with technology, you can actually gather your leadership. You can do a 3-hour session na recheck ulit. No, you're still working. Still work. Sometimes ang gusto nyo kasi planning session, sometimes you go to wherever, Tagaytay, and you have to. But right now, it will be I will tell you, it's going to be a very efficient planning process where you set your sights. Kasi after a crisis is over, the bigger challenge is the aftermath. Diba? It's always the rebuild stage, the aftermath. And in that case, where will you play given, okay, may mga nasirang vegetables and meat sa ref, all of those things, customers don't know where to go. So it's up to you to take that opportunity if you plan well for it. So what I always tell entrepreneurs is that you have to be ready after 60 days and do that scenario planning. If 30 days or 60 days, if the quarantine is lifted, what is your day one? Right? And
so, sorry, Donald, to interrupt, but what you're saying now is that now that you have, as you mentioned, to reset the button and come up with this planning, and then plan also how you rebuild it. Are you saying that entrepreneurs should come up with different scenarios, like say a 30-day, 60-day plan? Because we, of course, based on the pronouncement of the president, the state of calamity will be in 6 months, and we don't know yet as of now if there's going to be lockdown. So when they plan, when small businesses would plan, or even large corporations, what scenarios should they look at and look into?
For me, the first thing they have to do is they have to look at, again, go back to what started it all, meaning why they started the business, who they wanted to help. That has to be very clear. In many cases, I've seen so many businesses when they started from point A and they want to go, in the end, is to help the Filipinos, whether feed them, clothe them, give them healthcare. As on a day-to-day, when you're running the business, you somewhat divert because there are other opportunities, and you expand and expand, and later you realize you've already deviated from the core, and the core, what you call the core essence, meaning what you really intend that business to do.
Somehow related to your vision.
Yeah, related. Yeah, so you have to. It's a time for you to really bring it back to where you really want. So go look at why you set up that business. So it has to be very clear with you and older people. Once that is clear, then you can actually do certain scenario planning already, right? So you cannot, the business cannot survive just by earning money without an essence, what I call, without a real essence. So the business essence is, if you're familiar with Simon Sinek, why, right? Find your why. So if you do not have your business essence, then you end up very transactional with your customers. If you've seen already some of the more successful businesses, they have what they call a higher calling, and that actually will take you through, especially in this crisis time. No, in the words of my mentor Josiah, go find your purpose. The business has to have a purpose, and that purpose is never articulated with profits. It has to be something that you do for your fellow man, and by doing that well, then you actually earn more profits. By doing it very well.
Which is interesting, Donald, because that is maybe if I can quote others when they say this separates the men from the boys. Because at this point, there are a lot of companies who are doing that, taking care of their people, making sure that there's protection for their employees. But before I go into the other details, you mentioned about the winning and losing industries earlier during the interview. So, halimbawa, ayun nga, number one would be alcohol. So, if you are in the winning industry, and of course you want to maintain that market leadership, the question is, what specific strategies would you do so that you would maintain that kind of leadership even after the crisis? And what are those industries that you think, aside from health, wellness, would continue to flourish after the crisis?
If you are in the category of winners, and most of you would know where you are, because you will have that the demand side would be knocking on your doors, right? So regardless of that industry, if you are on what you call on the winning side, you will be judged by what you do. Because as you've seen, those who have will be judged how they use their wealth and their power. And in many cases, for example, from the business's perspective, what I always say, let's say alcohol, because it's the easiest. The market leader will be judged not by how they actually market their product, because in this stage, in this period of crisis, market share, you don't even count market share if you're a marketing person because the demand is high. So people are not loyal to any brand. As long as there's an alcohol there, I don't care anymore, right? Because the supply is low. So what you are therefore judged by how well you do it. If you're the market leader, I would suggest that you actually bring down your price a little, you give it and have it more accessible to more people. So you are actually in that stage where, in the end, I would tell you already, when you started your planning for 2020, your revenue numbers and your profit numbers, you have that already. In this time of increased demand, kumbaga, the influx of people wanting your product, kumbaga grasya yun eh. They're given to you. They're in a way blessing. And therefore, you have to find a way. Your numbers will, hopefully, you do not find a way to say, okay, I cannot double my sales and profits. Because in a time of crisis, that should not be your guiding light. You should actually stay true to whatever your numbers are. And therefore, whatever your profits, you should be giving out. You should actually, as the demand goes up, you should be distributing more, helping more people. Because in the end, after this period, you will now be judged by what did you do? And people will remember you for that.
That is interesting, Donald. Another thing now is this. So, kitang-kita naman natin yung how entrepreneurial Filipinos are. Example, when there was a lack of masks, so what enterprising Filipinos did was to, come up with, what's this, yung piece of cloth, and they really created a new product out of it. So, the question there is, should the entrepreneurs really look for opportunities to really meet or serve the demand? And in these COVID times, what do you think are the opportunities where entrepreneurs can really, put their hands into?
For me, I'm going to be very practical here, right? When I answer that question, of course, in times of crisis, there are opportunities. You will find certain businesses that badly put, back to alcohol. If the alcohol supply is very low, you can actually go into that business. You can find ways and means to sell it. But for me, that is very temporary. So as an entrepreneur, I would always say, if you're good in a restaurant business, if you're good in whatever business, stay true to that. Serve your employees well. So for example, and I'm saying 13-month pay, I'm not saying that. Of course, it would be nice. But for example, if you know some who have restaurants, who have 10 employees, and you're a restaurant owner, and you, for example, said, I cannot advance 13 months to you because 2 months pa lang eh. So how much is that anyway? But if you really care enough, then at the very least, you actually, yung may mga bigas naka-store, ibigay mo, right? So
not necessarily in cash, but in kind.
But make sure that all their families are well fed. And like I said, you will be judged based on that. Because your employees know naman also the state of your business. They will not be demanding everything from you because if you're transparent with them.
That's right.
Right? So I would think that for entrepreneurs, of course, if you're a serial entrepreneur, you want to post and sell and you find ways, that's okay if you have nothing to do. But if you're a real entrepreneur, I would suggest you go back, you do your planning, you start reflecting, yourself, you and your leadership team. If you have a small leadership team, at least you plan for your business for the long haul ahead. Because that's how you run that business. Right? Rather than defocusing on doing other things. May opportunity, let's go. But that's very short term. But you can do that. Why not? There's nothing stopping you. If you see an opportunity, that's a mark of an entrepreneur also.
Okay. We have a lot of questions to ask. Open for Business will return after this break. Stay tuned.
Mga kababayan, lalo na sa mga OFWs sa Middle East at North Africa, may good news kami para sa inyo. Mapapanood na ninyo ang Net25 at iba pang Filipino channels na hatid ng OSN sa presyong abot kaya. Libre ng box at installation, walang admin fees at no extra charges. Saktong entertainment na sakto lang sa budget mo. Bumisita na sa pinakamalapit na OSN store o dealer. And subscribe now! 25 at OSN. Siguradong at home ka dito.
Open for Business is back, and still with me is Donald Lim, the Chief Operating Officer of Dito CME and the Chief Innovation Officer of the Udenna Corporation. Donald, we talked about the winning industries earlier and what they should really do to maintain their market leadership, or what specific activities they have to do to ensure that, as you mentioned, it's not necessarily the profit that they will make, but how they will impact on their employees. Now, the more important question is, who are or what are the losing industries? You mentioned earlier a number of those industries, sectors that will be affected. What are these, and what do you think should be done? Will they totally change their business models to ensure that they will survive for the next 2 or 6 months?
Well, of course, from the losing industries, no, of course, number one impacted is tourism, because without travel, people cannot get around. People will not converge, right? So you can't be part of a tour. So the tourism, hotels, the restaurants that serve the customers, all the way from museums to everyone else, they will be heavily impacted with it. I think, and I think that's the best time for me. When you scale down your business, some would be skeletal, some would even have to close, and that's okay. Because if it's a crisis, sabi ko, no, when you look at the stage, what I call the stages of grief, right? Stage of grief, right? So initially, you first have denial, you have anger, but in the end, it's all about acceptance. You accept there are times when everything is blossoming and you're in a tourism industry, everything is doing very well. There are times like today, this time, when things are bad. And in many cases, it will force you to revisit, relook at your business strategy, your vision, like what I said earlier. So for that, I think you have to, especially if you're a big hotel, I think you would have a certain number of, you have your, what I call, may PC ka, right? You have certain cash flow to sustain the people at the very least, right? And again, you will be judged by what you do also in this time of hardship, how you treat your people. Those who are in the smaller business side, you also have to, when people were saying, when I own a restaurant, I want to do a feeding program, that's fine. And that's fine, that's totally fine. But I think you can only sustain yourself 2-3 days. The reality is, you have to relook at what lies ahead. So in this time when you have to really just focus your energies on planning, right? I think dito yung what we call scenario planning, dito yung what will you do after 30 days, how will you, if this extends to 60 or 90 days, how will you run a business from that? No, some who are totally virtual is okay, but if you operate a kitchen, if you operate certain manufacturing, something have to keep on moving. So for me, maybe spend the next 2-3 weeks trying to work, because the industries you come from different industries, so it would have to depend on how you will find businesses. But what I always say, when you look back, it's always the heart of the entrepreneur. When you started, in many cases, as an entrepreneur, you find an opportunity or you find a business, a problem. People will always consume as people, right? Life goes on, people will always consume. That platform on how we deliver our product or services will just change. So I think you have to, I don't have a do this, step 1, step 2, step 3, because you would come from different industries. And I will not say that I'm an expert in any of these industries that all of you would be viewing from. But what I would always say is that given this scenario, you wear and go back to your core, your entrepreneur core, and see how you can serve your customers better. whether it is online. No, for example, I was looking at my Facebook. So one of my friends who owns a gym, my gym is closed, right, and we're just starting. So 1 year pa lang, we haven't even turned a profit. How could I retain my customers? And of course, you have so many ideas like you create a Zoom session, go on Zoom. You still, it's creating that relationship still with your customers,
Yes.
right? And then people would say, oh, well, if you do that session, let's say when you have your aerobic session, whatever, if you do it online, you can always check it in YouTube. You can find others. People will not pay. But I said, no. If you have a relationship and you are really caring about your customers and you're giving advice, just be, not just, okay, let's do this exercise, follow me. Right? But really after that, what else can you do after? Then there is value. As an entrepreneur, you always bring value to a customer need. The difference is just that the entire scenario, the environment has changed. So you go back to your roots. Now that this landscape has changed, how will you bring that value to them? Right? And it's time to be creative. I think for us, let's be optimistic that things will go better. Right? But at the same time, let's also, like what I've said, people will consume, life goes on. So people have to eat, they have to sleep, they have to exercise, they have to stay healthy, they have to work and provide value. And if we create a society where we give value to each other, a society will thrive, regardless of whether you are in an office or everyone is working at home. Right? So I think that should be the mindset that we have. And entrepreneurs should be actually inspiring each other also, right? And sharing ideas. I will never say I have all the ideas. That's why I'm also very active. If you go to the Facebook group, the Association of Filipino Franchise,
Yes.
you have so many groups, the Philippine Marketing Association,
Yeah.
you have so many MAB. I mean, these are the groups I'm affiliated with. I'm sure there are some who I'm not affiliated with. They're also online. They're teaching people. They're giving advice, right? But after 2-3 weeks of giving advice, one should now take action, right? So I would suggest go online, be very active, attend a lot of forums that are out there. But at the end, it's all about now recalibrate and how you will manage now your next level of your business, in a purely online setting.
Donald, you asked a very important question earlier. You said, how do you bring value to them? Them meaning consumers.
Yes.
I noticed, and even Time wrote about this. People don't want to be alone, and there was this article that said never before has been social media was really used the way the founders have envisioned it to be. What is now the advantage of the people, especially the technopreneurs who really used technology, as a major enabler of their business? Would the businesses will now have to shift their marketing strategies towards digital marketing to be able to address the needs of the market, which is we can see and we notice that a lot of them are in the digital sphere, and a lot of things are now sold or served via online.
I think platforms would remain to be platforms. So social media, the space itself, will now become a major source of news and entertainment and communication. So that is a given already. But how we maximize it now, right? So we've seen already. So I also teach in schools. I remember 10 years ago when I asked a student to do a marketing plan. It is very obvious. They do TV, radio, print. That is how I would do a marketing plan when I was in college, way before. And even 10 years ago when I started teaching, 2010. But as I've been teaching for the past 10 years, I've slowly seen, even without teaching them, how it has evolved. You're now seeing the past 3 years, all their marketing plans are purely digital. So before, in 2010, 11, 2012, I was saying, where is digital here? You have to put a digital also here. Now, 2018, 19, 20, I was saying, where is above the line? Why you can't do it purely digital also, right? So again, business, when you communicate with your customers, you have to accept that digital is a very practical way. It's of course it's inexpensive. They are there already, but of course other traditional methods would matter also. But in the very end, it's always that relationship with the customer that matters. So what kind of relationship are you able to establish? For one, let's say a restaurant, a gym owner, I would always tell them, if you are a company who thrives on people come in, you serve them, and they go out, but you never know their name or you never talk to them, then I would say in this time, then because you started your relationship with the customer in a very transactional way, then if there's nothing left today, then there's nothing to transact. You lose that customer. But if you keep on communicating with them, so I've seen a lot of brands also online. Like I've seen a community restaurant, a spa, a gym, where they keep on posting. I said, why are you still posting? They're not going into the gym anymore. They're not going there to eat. And they would say precisely that, right? That's why I still communicate. I'm not now posting what's on my menu, but I tell them that to inspire them, to let them remember that we're with them in this period of crisis. So if you look at a lot of the tech companies today, most of the tech companies are, again, a lot of the companies still need the physical contact. Like, for example, if you're Grab, you still need to ferry people, right? So it's not a purely tech company, right? So unless you're a media platform like Spotify or Netflix, where I'm sure the usage would be up now, or like TikTok right now would be very, very much way up in terms of usage. Most of the tech businesses would still have to utilize a physical, face-to-face physical engagement. So on that side, they have to also relook at how they do it. I would think, for example, when I was talking to, because so we teach online right now. So one of the discussions we have is, if you are Grab, for example, you still have a Grab Express where you can deliver stuff. But can you still operate, right? And again, we were brainstorming, how else can you operate? Can you, rather from B to C, can you do B2B, right? Like fleet of cars where you tie up with a health center and you ferry older doctors from one point. So only one passenger, two passengers from one point A to point B, from hospital to wherever. So you can also start new ways, right? Given the demands of the time. You do not deviate from your core, which is still to ferry people, but you can actually change your strategy to address the demand of the time.
So what you're saying, Donald, is, like, say, even if you're doing digital before, and with the crisis that's happening, you have to, all the more utilize this digital marketing and online strategies to survive.
Yes, and you have to make a pivot. No? I think right now, number one, again, you have to decide what industry you're in. Meaning, are you going to win here or are you going to rest first, right? And in many cases, I always tell people, sometimes people say, oh, no, I'm in the tourism industry, we're going to die. I would always say, no. Actually, if you look at people in itself, by its nature, we're all survivors. We're very resilient. Unless this goes like worst case 1 year, then that's a different story. But for 30 days and 60 days, it really gives you the time to do your reflection, to do that internalizing, which I think people find it very hard when I talk about that. But that's so important because right now, when you come out of this crisis, you will become better, stronger, and more determined to fight. So you will not be in that stage where it's now I'm already just break even. This would really throw us into the pit, and we will not be able to recover. I always say I beg to disagree. If you now spend this time to really discuss, to meet, to keep on meeting, even if it's purely online, you keep that conversation going with your team, with your people. I think you will get more and more ideas, right? Kasi nga, when it's business as usual, we do not spend a lot of time thinking, reflecting, and people always forget that. That if you ask, I've been very lucky to have met a lot of, our tycoons and those who are very good businessmen. They would always say, most of their time they spend thinking, right, and strategizing, right. But sometimes as a business owner, we tend to think 10% and 90% we have to operate. Sometimes 1% thinking. The rest, we're there on ground there. We're rolling up our sleeves. We're doing everything. Right? So I think we have to spend more time really thinking, because like what I always say, if you're the general, you have to be out of the battle. Yeah, you have been looking at the forest rather than going in and chopping each of the trees. Even if you're the best at it, you have to get people to do it for you. So you get a full appreciation of your industry, your business, who your competitors are, who you are serving, and what are the white spaces you can go into.
Wow, perfect. And that's a lot of insights. There's a lot of insights there. Now, Donald, I think we're lacking time, but I have to ask this. So aside from being a chief executive of a large corporation, you are also an entrepreneur. What is your comment as far as the government's way in addressing this crisis, especially if you are representing the business sector or as an SME owner? Do you think that the government is somehow putting all the necessary policies to mitigate the impact of this crisis?
I think it's very hard to judge, right? I mean, for example, we've seen many years ago, 9/11, we've seen so many crises affecting so many countries, right? The governments will always be judged by in the aftermath rather than on the time of crisis, right? It's so hard to, it's so easy to say negative things only because you are affected or your neighbor is affected or you just see someone trolling and you just want to just go there and troll with people. And that's what I always tell everyone, our countrymen, that you don't want that kind of a negative space on social media. Number one, always tell the truth. Number two, if you see something that's being done right, tell people about it. If you see something that's not being done right, of course, again, be very truthful and maybe point it out as a point for improvement. But I don't think I am in any position. Of course, there will always be points for improvement, but everything is always hindsight. Like I always say, in the point of crisis, it's a chess game. You move, and the virus or whoever moves, and everyone in the world moves. Everyone in the Philippines moves, and then you move again. The government can only move so much given the facts that they are given what everything is being given to them, and they operate on that lens. So unless they are God and they have perfect information, no one can really say what is the best way, right? But as citizens, we have to just give our support. If the government says this, we have to follow. We have to follow. We cannot just not follow. Then you will have chaos everywhere else, right? But I think for me, for everyone else, protect yourself, keep yourself healthy, keep your families healthy, stay indoors. I mean, those are basic. You can follow the basic. You have no right to criticize the government. If you can, sometimes people criticize the government as giving not enough food and whatever to the poor. Maybe you can do your share also. Yeah. But this is not the time where we fight each other, right? And then in the end, like again, in the aftermath, that is when our governments, you yourself, you your business, that is the we will be judged, and we will also judge ourselves, right? How well we do.
Okay, nice. Before I ask you a few more tips for entrepreneurs, a lot of people will be asking, and they will blame me if I would not ask this. We have been waiting for the third telco. I think there might be some things that you cannot disclose, but any message that you can tell our audiences who are expecting Dito CME to be in operation, and what is it that people will expect from the third telco in the coming years?
I think as my role in Udenna and Dito CME, what we firmly believe in is that every Filipino should have that right and access, meaning make it very cheap, fast internet. We believe that if you empower Filipinos with internet and communications, we can really rule the world. Right? So I think based on that mantra of Udenna, that we work for you, let us work for you, we will actually be hand in hand with helping you, empowering you to make sure that we uplift the lives of Filipinos through technology. Right? So we will be doing a lot of work. I'm just 7 weeks in my current role, but I think beyond the third telco, we're setting our sights on a lot of big things that hopefully we can help our country. I think even my CEO, Dennis, would always say, always do whatever is best for our countrymen, do whatever is best for the Filipino, how we can serve them better, right? Can we uplift their lives? Because once the Filipino rises, everyone benefits, right? And we have to have that perspective.
And your final marketing tips to entrepreneurs in these COVID times?
Stay true to yourself. Stay true to your business. this is a crisis, a period of crisis. This is the time where everyone, I keep on saying, you will be judged by what you do. So always, and people will remember it. So at the very least, for entrepreneurs, try to make it easy for your personnel and people, your employees. It's also a time for you to unleash again your creative geniuses, to find other opportunities where you can earn, right? But stay true to your business and use whatever digital platforms that you can use to find new markets or find new opportunities.
That's Donald Lim, the Chief Operating Officer of Dito CME and the Chief Innovation Officer of Udenna Corporation. Open for Business will be back with our word of the week and our terms of the week. Stay tuned.
Know the latest news and information here and abroad in Aguila Balita, the morning and noontime news programs brought about by the synergy of Net25 and Radyo Aguila.
Get the fresh news and reports from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao in our midday newscast in Aguila, Pilipinas.
Track the latest stories in the provinces in Aguila, Provincia.
Be aware of important events in the region in ASEAN in Focus.
And be updated with the biggest news around the world with the support of its international correspondents and volunteers in Eagle News International.
Tune in to Mata ng Aguila and get the day's headlines and news that are sharp, accurate, and objective. Catch all of these on Net25, your reliable source of news, entertainment, and technology updates.
You can also watch our news and current affairs programs and entertainment shows through our Eagle News and Net25 Facebook pages, YouTube channel, at Eagle News, and in our live streaming sites. Be informed with relevant news and information in these interesting times.
And our terms of the week are isolation and quarantine. According to the HHS.gov, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, isolation is used to separate ill persons who have a communicable disease from those who are healthy. Isolation restricts the movement of ill persons to help stop the spread of certain diseases. For example, hospitals use isolation for patients with infectious tuberculosis. Quarantine, on the other hand, is used to separate and restrict the movement of well persons who may have been exposed to a communicable disease to see if they become ill. These people may have been exposed to a disease and do not know it, or they may have the disease but do not show symptoms. Quarantine can also help limit the spread of communicable disease. Isolation and quarantine are used to protect the public by preventing exposure to infected persons or to persons who may be infected. And our word of the week is from Hunter S. Thompson. He said, "Paranoia is just another word for ignorance." Thank you for watching Open for Business in your homes. Join us again in the next episodes of Open for Business for more insights from CEOs, thought leaders, and industry experts promoting business development in the Philippines. See you again every Saturday and Sunday here in Open for Business, where we discuss business information, deliver the latest business news to keep you informed and open for business and be ahead of the curve from vision to action. You're on Facebook Live on Eagle News, and you can watch us again in the video section of the Eagle News Facebook page and on eaglenewslive.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Eagle News. On March 28, Saturday, Open for Business will be holding its first digital public forum from 8 a.m. to 12 noon on your Facebook, YouTube, and streaming site. The theme of the Open for Business Forum is MSMEs in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Register in our Facebook page. The online forum is free. For Open for Business, this is Cesar Vallejos. Have a great day.